Hello. My name is Sarah Carter. And 3 days ago, while my daughter was fighting leukemia in the next room, my husband married my cousin. Without a word. Without a warning. He left me bleeding and didn't bother to check if I survived. And now? Now I'm sitting in the dark, staring at the photo of their wedding. Wondering if this is what betrayal sounds like, silence. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, phone glowing in my palms like a warning light I didn't know how to obey. Emma had finally drifted off after another night of nausea and broken sleep, her body curled into itself like something too fragile to touch. The apartment was silent except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of traffic down on 16th Street. I wasn't looking for anything. Just passing the time. Just trying not to think. But then I saw it. Victoria's post. Her name wasn't even the thing that hit me first. It was the picture. The lace train of her gown trailing behind her like a whisper of entitlement, her hand looped through the arm of the man I had once called my husband. Daniel looked the same, confident, polished, like betrayal never touched his bones. The caption was worse. Can't believe I get to marry my best friend today. I didn't feel the phone slip from my hand. I only noticed when it thudded against the floor with a dull echo that seemed louder than it should have been in the quiet room. I stared at it like it had lied. Like if I blinked hard enough, the screen would crack and reveal a different version of the world, one where my husband hadn't married my cousin, one where I wasn't sitting alone in the dark, waiting for Emma's next lab result. But the world didn't shift. It stayed exactly as it was. Unforgiving. My thumb hovered over the image. Her smile was perfect, curated. His hand rested on the small of her back like it belonged there. And in that carefully edited life, there was no space for me. Not even a whisper. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deleted me. I picked up the phone, numb fingers slow on the dial pad, and called the only person I thought might give a damn. My mother. Sarah? Her voice was too bright for 11:42 p.m. Everything all right? I didn't answer that. Did you know Daniel married Victoria today? Silence. Then a slow, uncomfortable sigh. Sweetheart, we didn't want to upset you. I felt the floor tilt. So you knew. You all knew. You've been distant, honey. Always working, always busy with. Well, Emma's treatments. We didn't think you'd want to come. I could barely breathe. You didn't think I'd want to be at my husband's wedding? He's not your husband anymore, Sarah. You need to stop holding on. The laugh that broke from my throat was hollow. So that's it? You all just moved on and hoped I wouldn't notice? Her tone tightened. Victoria's been there for the family, Sarah. She's helped us. She's been present. She replaced me. We didn't say that. But you didn't have to. My voice dropped to a whisper. You made it clear. There was a pause. The kind that fills a room like smoke. I hope Emma's feeling better, she said at last, trying to pivot. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I stood in the kitchen, hands pressed to the counter, trying to hold myself together as the tile floor felt too far below me. I couldn't cry. If I cried, I'd unravel, and I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not when Emma needed me to hold steady. My eyes landed on the refrigerator. A magnet held up a drawing Emma had made 2 weeks ago, the three of us, me, her, and Daniel, holding hands beneath a crooked sun. She'd drawn him taller than me, like she always did. My name was misspelled. The smile on my face was big and round. I pulled the paper free, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my sweater pocket. Some illusions deserve to be buried gently. The night stretched on, thin and quiet. I made tea but didn't drink it. The bitterness curled in the air anyway. When the house finally slept again, I sat on the couch and opened the drawer to the bottom cabinet. Inside, a stack of letters, some opened, some not. Medical bills. Insurance denials. I didn't even flinch anymore. I took out my laptop and logged into the email I hadn't opened in days. There it was. The confirmation. A federal infrastructure grant. $70 billion. 10-year timeline. My firm, my name, on the top line of the award summary. I stared at it for a long time. No one had congratulated me. No one even asked if I was still working. I hadn't told anyone. Not even Daniel. Not when we were still pretending to try. Not when he stopped showing up at Emma's chemo appointments. Not when he started saying I was too intense, that I lived in hospitals and spreadsheets. That was when I knew he was already gone. But tonight, With his hand on Victoria's waist and my name nowhere in the wedding party, I knew he hadn't just left. He had erased me. I stood up, went to the window, and looked out at the city. The lights blurred into golden steel. My hand went to Emma's drawing again. She hadn't erased me. She'd drawn me holding her hand. That's what mattered. That's what would always matter. I sat back down and opened a blank email. Addressed it to my lawyer. Subject line, divorce filing. I didn't write much. Just this. Proceed. Effective immediately. I hit send. And for the first time in a long while, the silence in the room didn't feel empty. It felt free. The light from the hallway barely reached the kitchen tiles. I stood barefoot, the cold floor grounding me just enough to breathe. I didn't sit. Sitting felt like surrender, and I'd done enough of that lately. I stared at the phone on the counter, the same phone that had once lit up with Daniel's messages, running late, but thinking of you. Emma okay today? Let's grab Thai for dinner. Now it sat there, silent. Empty. My fingers moved before I could second-guess myself. I pulled up my mother's number, hesitating only when I saw her name on the screen. Mom. Just 3 letters that used to feel like safety. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Sarah? Is everything okay? I almost ended it right there. But something brittle inside me cracked. He married Victoria. The line went quiet. I saw the photos, I added, my voice flat. On Instagram. I wasn't invited. I didn't even know they were together. Another pause. Then, as if she'd been preparing the line for weeks, she said, Honey, you've been so busy. We didn't want to add stress. I pressed my palm into the counter to steady myself. You knew. You all knew. It wasn't our place to interfere, she said, her tone sharp around the edges. You and Daniel were already drifting apart. Victoria, she's been present. She checks in. Helps out. I blinked. She helps out? With what, exactly? Mom's voice turned cool. With the family. With your father. With Emma. My breath caught. Emma has leukemia. She doesn't need a stand-in aunt who posts selfies at brunch and calls it caregiving. That's not fair, Sarah. I didn't answer. The silence pulsed between us like a warning. She sighed. You've always been intense. It's hard to talk to you without it turning into drama. My fingers curled around the phone tighter. You think this is drama? You're making it that way. A sharp, involuntary laugh escaped my throat. You think finding out that your ex-husband married your cousin in secret is just a melodramatic hiccup? Her next words landed like stones. Maybe if you weren't always working, you'd have seen it coming. That did it. My voice dropped to a whisper. You think I worked for fun? While Daniel skipped Emma's chemo to fly to Florida for client meetings? While you and Dad acted like everything was fine, as long as we didn't talk about it. Don't bring your father into this. Why not? I snapped. He looked me in the eye at Thanksgiving and asked if I was still with Daniel. He knew. And he played dumb. You're being unfair, she muttered. And you're being cruel. Another silence. Then she exhaled, long, theatrical, like I was a burden she had hoped wouldn't call tonight. I hope Emma's feeling better, she said, her voice clipped. I ended the call. I stared at the screen until it went dark, until the reflection of my own exhausted face stared back. I didn't cry right away. I walked to the window and stared at the flickering apartment lights across the courtyard. Somewhere in one of those units, people were laughing. Cooking dinner. Watching old sitcom reruns while folding laundry. Somewhere, someone's mom had just called to say, I love you. We're here. Mine told me I worked too much. When the tears came, they weren't loud. They crept quietly down my neck, slow and warm, like grief had learned to whisper. I sat at the table, elbows on the wood, hands cradling my forehead. It was too quiet. Emma's room was finally still after hours of pain meds and soft lullabies. She didn't ask for much anymore. Just for me to sit beside her, to rub her back when the nausea hit, to braid her hair when the nurses let her go outside. I did those things. I would always do those things. And Daniel? He was dancing under chandeliers with Victoria in a rented tuxedo. My eyes drifted to the framed photo above the fridge. Our wedding. 10 years ago. He looked at me like I was the only thing that existed. I remembered how his hand shook when he put the ring on my finger. I remembered the way he whispered, I don't deserve you, during our first dance. He was right. I stood, walked over, took the photo down. The glass was dusty. I held it for a moment longer than I should have, then placed it face down on the counter. In that quiet kitchen, I finally let myself say it aloud. I gave you everything. And it was never enough. My voice didn't echo. It dissolved. I reached for my phone again. Not to call my mother. Not to beg for some last scrap of familial decency. I called my lawyer. The ring was brief. "Sarah," he answered, voice alert despite the hour. "Hi," I said. "I'm ready to file. I don't want to wait." There was a pause. Then, gently, "I'll start the paperwork. We'll need to discuss custody, assets." "I want full custody," I said. "No assets. No negotiation. Just the papers." Another pause. "Understood." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Thank you." When the call ended, I sat in silence again, but it wasn't the same silence. This one felt earned. Like the moment before a door finally creaks open. The next morning, I made coffee. Fed Emma toast and watched her nibble at it like it was made of glass. Her hands were cold. I tucked the blanket around her shoulders and kissed the crown of her head. She leaned against me. "Mom?" "Yeah, sweetheart? Are we okay?" I swallowed. "We will be. I promise." And I meant it. Later that day, while she napped, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the cracked leather of my old suitcase. It had followed us through 3 apartments, 2 cities, and 1 broken marriage. I opened it. Not to pack. But to remind myself that I could. I sifted through a few pieces of clothing, brushing my fingers over fabric that once held memories, his college hoodie, an old maternity dress, a t-shirt from our anniversary in Nashville. I folded each piece carefully, not with nostalgia, but with respect. Some things didn't need to be thrown away. Just archived. In the corner of the suitcase was an envelope. I recognized Daniel's handwriting. It was a note he left on my nightstand 3 years ago after I collapsed from exhaustion. "Take care of yourself. You're the glue holding us together." I read it again. And then I tore it in half. Quietly. Slowly. Because healing doesn't roar. It exhales. The paper tore easier than I expected. The sound was soft, like fabric unraveling. Like breath being released after being held too long. I let the 2 halves of the note drift into the trash, then stood still, waiting for guilt. Waiting for that sting of regret. But it didn't come. Just stillness. Just a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. 2 days later, Daniel texted. "Need to talk. Just you and me. Don't want this to get messy." Messy. That was his word for it. Not betrayal. Not abandonment. Not erasing a woman and her daughter to start a new life with her cousin. Messy. I agreed to meet him. Not for closure. I didn't believe in that anymore. I just wanted to look him in the eye and see what was left. The cafe was neutral ground. Quiet. Clean. The kind of place where people wore earbuds and said, "I'm good, thanks," too quickly to baristas who didn't care. We sat across from each other in a booth near the window. I didn't order anything. He looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from chasing things that don't love you back. His hair was thinner. His shirt was pressed. Still clinging to control in the places he could. "Thanks for coming," he said. I didn't answer. I wanted to hear him squirm first. He glanced down, rubbed his palms against his jeans. "I guess you know everything now." I waited. He sighed. "Victoria and it just happened." I tilted my head. "You mean, she tripped and landed in your bed while I was at the hospital with our child?" His face twitched. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Use real words." He looked at me then. Fully. Like he just realized I wasn't going to fold. It wasn't about her. It was about me. About what I couldn't handle anymore. My fingers curled under the table. "You mean Emma?" He nodded. Slowly. "The chemo. The fear. The crying. Every day was heavy. You were always so focused on saving her. There was nothing left for anything else." "You mean there was nothing left for you?" He swallowed. "I needed light, Sarah. Something easier." I leaned back, the words heavy but not surprising. "So you chose easy over real?" "I chose to survive." "No," I said, voice low. "You chose to abandon." He didn't argue. Which told me more than any apology ever could. I tried, he offered. I stayed as long as I could. I almost laughed. Like a house guest? He shook his head. You don't understand. I do understand, I cut in. You wanted the version of me that smiled at fundraisers and planned vacations. Not the woman who held our daughter while she vomited blood. You wanted me soft and available, not fierce and exhausted. He looked like he wanted to protest, but he didn't. Just stared at the wood grain in the table like it might open and swallow him. I'm not angry anymore, Daniel, I said after a long pause. I just finally see you clearly. He blinked. And what do you see? A man who mistook selfishness for survival. A man who left a sinking boat and called it bravery. He exhaled slowly. So, what happens now? I stood. Now, I live. Without pretending you're coming back. He looked up at me, eyes clouded. You've changed. Thank God, I whispered, turning to leave. Outside, the air was brisk. Chicago didn't care about heartbreak. It just kept moving. And so did I. I walked. Past the bakery Emma used to beg for cookies from. Past the bookstore where Daniel and I once argued over baby names. Past the places where life used to live. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. The grief had settled. Solid. Contained. I made it to the corner and stopped, breath visible in the cool air. I could still hear Daniel's voice. Still see the way he twisted words to make his betrayal sound noble. But I didn't carry it anymore. I let the weight slide off with each step. This was my life now. No one else's. The next morning, I sat in my lawyer's office. A tall man with kind eyes and a desk too clean to be real. He pushed a stack of papers toward me. Custody filings, he said. Asset declarations. Timeline proposals. I nodded. You okay? He asked gently. No, I said honestly. But I will be. He passed me a pen. I didn't hesitate. I signed. Page after page. Each signature a goodbye. Each curve of ink a promise to myself. When I was done, he leaned forward. I'll file these today. Thank you, I said, meaning it. You're doing the right thing. I nodded. I know. Later that day, I visited Emma at the hospital. She was asleep when I arrived, her little body tangled in blankets, her breathing slow and uneven. Machines beeped softly around her like lullabies sung by wires. I sat beside her, holding her hand. Her fingers twitched, even in sleep. The nurse gave me a small smile as she adjusted a monitor. She's a fighter, she whispered. She gets it from me, I whispered back. I stayed there for hours. Just watching. Remembering. The day we got the diagnosis, Daniel had gone completely still. Like if he didn't move, it wouldn't be real. I had cried in the hallway alone, while he sat in the car googling clinical trials. After that, it was always me. The appointments. The ER visits. The nights with no sleep and too much fear. He showed up for pictures. I showed up for blood tests. And now? Now he was dancing with Victoria while I braided Emma's thinning hair and lied about how strong she looked. I kissed Emma's forehead and whispered, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe, baby. Whatever it takes. That night, I packed. Not everything. Just enough. Clothes. Documents. Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit. I left Daniel's things untouched. He could come collect the ghosts later. I wasn't running. I was choosing. Choosing peace over permission. Choosing truth over tolerance. Choosing myself. The air inside the lawyer's office felt too clean, like it had been scrubbed of feeling. I sat across from his desk, hands resting on a folder I couldn't bring myself to open. He talked about strategy, about timelines and custody precedents, words that sounded sharp and sterile. I nodded when I was supposed to, but my mind kept circling the same thought, Emma was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite that truth. Mrs. Carter, he said gently, you'll need to be patient. Custody battles take time. I met his eyes. Time isn't something my daughter has a lot of. He paused, studying me. We'll do everything we can, he said, his voice softening. But Daniel's legal team will push back hard. They'll use Emma's condition if they think it gives them leverage. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't flinch. Then they'll learn what happens when they mistake my silence for weakness. He nodded slowly. Understood. When I left his office, the afternoon sun hit me hard. It was the kind of light that made everything too visible, every flaw, every scar. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward the parking lot, each step measured, deliberate. For the first time, the fear didn't freeze me. It focused me. That night, after Emma was asleep, I found myself in the kitchen again. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I poured a glass of water and stared out the window, where the city lights flickered against the cold. And, as I stood there, I remembered the first apartment Daniel and I had shared. It had smelled like paint and burnt coffee. We didn't own much, just a couch that squeaked, and mismatched plates from a yard sale. But we were happy then. I could still see him sitting on the floor, holding a pizza box, saying, "We'll look back at this someday and laugh." And we did laugh, at first. We laughed when the pipes froze, when the landlord forgot our heat, when we survived on instant noodles and hope. I remember thinking, this is what love looks like. Simple. Honest. Enough. But somewhere along the way, that version of us disappeared. Replaced by meetings, appearances, and Daniel's need to be admired. He started speaking in the language of success, shares, projections, quarterly bonuses, while I spoke in scans, symptoms, side effects. We stopped speaking the same language altogether. I took a deep breath, quietly, gently, letting the memory settle. I'd given everything for us, and this was how it ended. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse. The walls were gray and high, the kind of place built to make people small. Daniel was already there, standing beside his lawyer, a tall woman with an expression that could slice through glass. He didn't look at me when I entered. My own lawyer leaned close. "Keep calm. Don't react to anything. Let me speak for you." I nodded. The judge's gavel sounded, a sharp crack that echoed through my bones. The proceedings began. Daniel's lawyer wasted no time. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "we have serious concerns about Ms. Carter's ability to provide a stable environment for her daughter, given the demands of her career and the child's ongoing medical needs." It was like being punched, but I didn't show it. "She's not a doctor," the lawyer continued. "She's an engineer who works long hours. Emma requires constant care, and we believe Mr. Carter can provide more consistency, especially now that he has a supportive home environment." A supportive home. She meant Victoria. I clenched my hands in my lap. My lawyer rose. "Your Honor, my client has managed Emma's care since the diagnosis. Every treatment, every hospital stay, every sleepless night, Miss Carter has been there. Mr. Carter, on the other hand, has been absent." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He wouldn't meet my gaze. The judge made notes, face unreadable. I stared at my hands, willing them to stay still. I thought of Emma's tiny fingers wrapped around mine during her last transfusion. Of her whispering, "Don't let go, Mommy." When the session ended, the judge spoke evenly. "We'll reconvene next week for the ruling." I stood on legs that felt like paper, thanked my lawyer, and walked out. Outside, the air hit my face cold and sharp. I could still hear Daniel's lawyer's words echoing in my ears, unfit, unstable, distracted. They didn't know me. They didn't know what it took to sit by a hospital bed every night and still show up for work every morning. They didn't know what it meant to carry both fear and hope in the same breath. Later that afternoon, I drove to the hospital. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and lemon wipes. When I reached Emma's room, her doctor was already there, flipping through her chart. "Good news," he said with a small smile. "Her counts are up. It's progress." I exhaled slowly. "That's good." He looked at me carefully. "She's strong, Sarah. So are you. But we'll need to stay cautious. The next few months are crucial." I nodded. "Whatever it takes." As he left, I sat by Emma's bed. Her eyelashes fluttered as she slept, her little chest rising and falling under the weight of the blanket. I brushed her hair away from her forehead, gently, softly. For a long moment, I just watched her. The machines beeped softly, steady and calm. It was strange, those sounds, once terrifying, had become the rhythm of my life. I remembered the day we found out she was sick. The hospital smell, the sound of the doctor's voice breaking through the air like glass. Daniel had stared at the floor, silent, as I asked question after question. Afterward, he'd gone home to make some calls. I had stayed, holding Emma, whispering lies about things being okay. I whispered again now, my voice quiet and steady. "I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe." That night, after we got home, I made tea and sat beside Emma on the couch. Rain drummed softly against the window. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a book open in her lap. "Mom," she said sleepily, "are we moving?" "Maybe," I said softly. "Would you like that?" She nodded. "Someplace sunny." "Then someplace sunny it is." She smiled faintly, her eyelids heavy. I stroked her hair as her breathing slowed. The world outside the window blurred, the streetlights melting into gold streaks through the rain. For the first time in weeks, peace settled in the room like a fragile truce. I closed my eyes and whispered to the quiet, to myself, to the universe that had taken and taken but somehow still left me standing. "We'll be okay. Gently, quietly we'll find our way back." When I woke that morning, the apartment was heavy with quiet. Emma was still asleep, the soft hum of her breathing steady, a fragile rhythm that reminded me of everything at stake. The rain had stopped, but clouds hung low, pressing the sky closer to the city. I sat at the table, my coffee untouched, reading through the court documents again. Each page felt like a test I hadn't signed up for. By the time I reached the courthouse, my palms were slick with nerves. The marble floors echoed every step I took, amplifying the tremor in my body. Inside, the judge's bench loomed high, the American flag draped behind him, cold and ceremonial. Daniel was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, perfectly composed. He didn't look at me. Not once. When they called my name, I stood. My heart felt too big for my chest. The bailiff swore me in, and then Daniel's lawyer began. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her tone deceptively polite, "can you explain how you balance a demanding full-time job with caring for a chronically ill child?" The words hit like a slap. "I make it work," I said. "I always have." She tilted her head, smiling like a teacher correcting a child. "You make it work. Does that mean Emma often stays with babysitters or at the hospital without you present?" My lawyer rose. "Objection. Leading question." "Sustained," said the judge. But the damage was done. The lawyer's smile widened. "Let's talk about your career, Mrs. Carter. You recently accepted a federal contract worth $70 billion, correct?" "Yes." "So while your daughter was in treatment, you were pursuing government contracts?" "I was securing her future," I said evenly. "Her care isn't free." She nodded, feigning sympathy. "Of course. It's just that most mothers I meet prioritize time over money when their child's life is at risk." Something inside me snapped. My throat burned, but I forced the words out calmly. "And most fathers I meet don't run off with their wife's cousin while their child's in chemotherapy." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Daniel's lawyer went pale. Daniel shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. The judge struck his gavel once. "Order." I took a deep breath, quietly, slowly, the way I'd learned to steady myself during Emma's hospital stays. "I'm here," I said softly. "I've been here. Every day, every appointment, every night she's cried herself to sleep. I don't need to explain that to anyone." The lawyer's smile faltered. The judge nodded toward me. "We'll take a short recess." Outside the courtroom, the air felt sharper. I leaned against the cool wall, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. When the recess ended, I walked back in with my head high. The next round of questioning was shorter. I kept my answers steady, my voice low but firm. By the end, I wasn't just defending myself, I was reclaiming the truth. That night, after the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment felt louder, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, Emma's soft breaths from the other room. My mind wandered back to the day I'd first heard the diagnosis. It was spring then, too bright a day for bad news. The doctor's words had come gently but landed like stones, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I remember gripping the sides of the hospital bed, the world spinning in slow motion. Daniel had been standing near the window, his reflection small and distant in the glass. When I turned to him, he just said, "We'll figure it out," before stepping into the hallway to make a call. That was the beginning of the silence between us. The kind that stretches so wide it becomes a wall. I shook my head, pulling myself back to the present. Emma's laughter from the day before echoed faintly in my memory. She was my anchor, the one reason I hadn't drowned. The phone rang around midnight. My heart jumped before I even picked it up. It was the doctor. "Sarah," he said, "Emma's numbers are lower than we expected. She's stable for now, but I think we should prepare for a longer stay." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Okay. I'll bring her in tomorrow." After the call, I stood by Emma's bed, brushing her hair off her forehead. Her skin was pale, her breath shallow. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. Not now. I had cried enough for both of us. I whispered softly, "You're strong, baby. Stronger than anyone knows." Her eyelids fluttered. "Mom, I'm here. Promise you won't let them take me away?" My throat tightened. "No one's taking you anywhere. Ever." She smiled, drifting back to sleep. I sat beside her until dawn, her small hand tucked in mine. The next day in court, my lawyer called our witnesses. A nurse from the oncology ward testified about my presence during Emma's treatments. A neighbor spoke about my long hours and still finding time to care for Emma. Daniel's lawyer cross-examined them all, but the cracks were starting to show. Each question she asked only revealed more of what everyone already knew. Daniel had left, and I had stayed. When it was my turn to speak again, the judge looked directly at me. "Mrs. Carter, do you have anything to add?" I stood. My knees trembled, but my voice didn't. "Only this," I said. "I've made mistakes, but walking away from my child wasn't one of them. I love Emma more than I love breathing. I will not let anyone take her from me." The courtroom went still. Daniel looked down, jaw tight, but he didn't interrupt. Even his lawyer stayed quiet. The judge nodded once. "We'll review the testimonies and issue a ruling next week." When I stepped outside, sunlight hit my face. I closed my eyes, breathing it in. The air tasted like rain and iron, like change. That evening, the doctor called again. "She's responding," he said. "Her white cell count is climbing." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Relief spread through me slowly, gently, like warmth finding its way back into cold fingers. I whispered, "Thank you." After hanging up, I turned to find Emma sitting on the couch, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders, cheeks pinker than they'd been in days. She smiled weakly. "Did we win, Mom?" "Not yet," I said, kneeling beside her. "But we're close." She nodded and leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, soft and steady. For the first time, I let myself believe that peace wasn't a distant place, it was this moment. This breath. This quiet fight I was finally learning how to win. The next morning began with the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was tight and waiting, like a held breath before a storm. I watched the steam rise from my coffee, curling into nothing, and thought about everything I still had to lose. Emma slept down the hall, her small frame lost beneath her blanket, her breathing shallow but steady. I knew I couldn't afford to crumble now. By the time I reached the courthouse, the air was sharp enough to sting. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, turning everyone pale. Daniel was already seated at his table. His lawyer, a woman with a voice like ice, stacked her papers neatly, eyes gleaming with precision. When the judge called us to order, the tension thickened. I felt the courtroom watching me, their curiosity disguised as politeness. My lawyer gave me a quiet nod. Then it began. Daniel's lawyer rose. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "we need to address the growing concern about Mrs. Carter's emotional stability. Our evidence shows she's been neglectful of her child's care, missing appointments, leaving Emma unattended, prioritizing work over health." My stomach clenched. Lies. Every word. My lawyer stood. Objection. None of this is supported by fact. But Daniel's lawyer was ready. "We have documentation from a hospital nurse indicating that Mrs. Carter left the premises for several hours during Emma's treatment." I froze. It was the night I'd left briefly to meet a contractor, one meeting to secure the grant that paid for Emma's medication. My voice trembled but didn't break. That was one night. One meeting that saved us from bankruptcy. The lawyer's lips curved. "So you admit it?" "I admit," I said evenly, "that I've done everything possible to keep my daughter alive. Including things you'd never understand." A ripple of murmurs passed through the courtroom. The judge rapped the gavel once. Daniel sat motionless beside her, his hands clasped tight. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Maybe guilt looked easier when it was hidden behind folded fingers. I pressed my palms against the edge of the table, grounding myself in the cool wood. My lawyer leaned close. "Stay calm," he whispered. But calm felt impossible. My blood hummed with a strange mix of rage and fear. I was being judged not for what I'd done wrong, but for what I'd survived. The lawyer continued her assault. "Your work hours exceed 60 hours a week. That's not sustainable for a child with Emma's needs. How do you justify that? I justify it, I said softly, by being the one who stayed. A flicker of something, maybe shame, passed across Daniel's face. The lawyer faltered for half a beat, then recovered. The court needs proof, not sentiment. I met her gaze. You can't measure love in timesheets. The words landed heavier than I intended. For a moment, the courtroom was silent, even the judge still. Then he cleared his throat and said, "We'll adjourn for the afternoon." As I stepped out into the daylight, it felt like the air itself had weight. My body ached from holding myself together. Outside the courthouse, I sank onto a bench, the wood cold beneath me. The world moved around me, cars honking, strangers passing, but I felt separate from it all. Then something inside me shifted. I took out my phone and called my lawyer before fear could stop me. "Sarah," he answered quickly. "You okay?" "No," I said, my voice low. "But I will be. We need to push harder. No more defense. I want to go on the offensive." He hesitated. "That's risky. We'll need proof of neglect from Daniel's side." "Then find it," I said. "Find every text, every missed payment, every absence. If they want a fight, I'll give them one." He exhaled. "All right. I'll start tonight." When I hung up, my hand shook, but not from fear, adrenaline. For the first time in months, I felt something stronger than despair. That night, Emma's breathing was uneven again. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back, feeling the fever rising beneath her skin. She looked smaller than usual, her cheeks flushed. "Hey," I whispered, forcing a smile. "You're okay, sweetheart. I'm here." Her eyes fluttered open. "Mom, am I sick again?" I swallowed. "A little. But you're stronger than this." She reached for my hand. "Don't cry." "I'm not crying," I said softly. But I was. Quietly. Slowly. The tears slipped down, almost invisible. When she fell asleep again, I stayed. Watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the hum of the monitor. I couldn't imagine the world without that sound. I whispered into the dark, "I can't lose you. Not like this." Morning came gray and heavy. I met with my lawyer in his office. He looked up from his notes and said, "We have a strategy. We'll present Daniel's absence during key medical milestones, his financial neglect, and the emotional distress he's caused." I nodded. "Do it. Whatever it takes." He leaned back. "You sure? Once we start this, there's no going back." "I'm already gone," I said. "Now I'm just reclaiming what's mine." His eyes softened. "You've changed, Sarah." I had to. When I left, the city buzzed with noise, horns, voices, footsteps, but it all felt distant. I stopped at a cafe Daniel and I used to go to. For a moment, I could see us there, his hand brushing mine, laughter over cheap coffee, two people who thought love was unbreakable. The memory stung, but it also fueled me. Nostalgia doesn't heal you. It reminds you why you need to move forward. That night, I opened the folder of legal documents again. Each page was another step toward freedom, toward Emma's safety. I traced the signatures, the dates, the motions. My lawyer had highlighted everything meticulously. I thought about Daniel's face in court, the flicker of guilt that vanished too quickly. About the woman beside him who smiled like she'd already won. And I promised myself, quietly, gently, that this story would not end the way they expected. Later, as I sat by Emma's bedside, I let myself drift into an old memory. Our first home again, Daniel carrying me across the threshold, both of us laughing. He'd whispered, "We'll build something that lasts." We did. But he left before it was finished. The memory faded. The room came back. Emma stirred beside me, whispering something I barely caught. "Love you, Mom." My throat tightened. "Love you more." I held her hand until my fingers went numb. Outside, the city was quiet, a rare peace after so many storms. I stared out the window, letting the light of the street lamps spill across the room. "This is it," I murmured. "We fight to win." The morning of the final hearing arrived with a kind of stillness that didn't belong to peace. It was the stillness before a verdict, the hush before truth has to stand on its own. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my jacket, watching a version of myself I almost didn't recognize, calm, composed, unshakable. My reflection didn't tremble. But my hands did. By the time I reached the courthouse, the hallways buzzed with low voices. I could hear the shuffle of papers, the whisper of polished shoes against the marble. Daniel was already seated when I walked in, his suit pressed, his tie perfect. His lawyer glanced at me with the satisfaction of someone who believed she had already won. The judge's gavel struck once. "We're ready to proceed." The lawyer rose, her tone crisp. "Your Honor, new evidence has been submitted showing that Mrs. Carter's work commitments have made her unable to provide the consistency and emotional stability a child like Emma requires." A stack of papers landed on the desk with a sharp slap. My heart pounded once, hard, but I didn't flinch. My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this is a distortion of the truth. These documents reflect a mother working tirelessly to provide medical care and financial stability for her child." Daniel's lawyer smirked. "Or a woman hiding behind her job to avoid the hard parts of parenting." I felt something in me flare. Not rage, clarity. My lawyer turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to respond?" I stood. The air felt too thin, like the whole room had forgotten how to breathe. I met the lawyer's eyes. "Do you have children?" She blinked. "That's irrelevant." "No," I said quietly, "it's everything. Because if you did, you'd understand that working to keep your child alive isn't neglect. It's survival." She opened her mouth, but I didn't stop. "While you're waving paper and calling it evidence, my daughter is fighting for her life. And I've been there, every appointment, every night she couldn't sleep, every single moment her small hand reached for mine." Where was Daniel? On business trips? In another woman's bed? Don't stand there and talk about parenting when all you have is theory. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge lifted a hand, silencing it. I sat back down, my pulse pounding in my ears, but my voice hadn't shaken. I wasn't the same woman who once whispered her pain into the dark. I had become the echo that refused to die. The lawyer straightened her papers, her voice icy. "The court requires facts, Mrs. Carter, not emotion." "Then let's talk about facts," I said. "The fact is, I stayed. The fact is, I paid every bill, managed every doctor's appointment, and kept a roof over our heads. The fact is, I'm the reason Emma is still here." Daniel's face was pale now. He stared at the floor. For a second, he looked small, like the weight of the truth was finally heavier than his pride. The judge tapped his pen against the desk. "That's enough for now. Let's proceed with the final testimonies." The lawyer called Daniel to the stand. He hesitated, his jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he might refuse. But then he stood, straightening his tie like armor. He swore in, sat, and folded his hands. The lawyer's voice softened. "Mr. Carter, do you have anything you wish to say to the court?" He swallowed hard. "Yes." His eyes found mine. For the first time in months, he looked straight at me. "I made mistakes," he said slowly. "More than I can count. I thought success meant being seen, being admired. I didn't understand that what mattered most was what I'd already had. Sarah, you carried everything. The work, the home, Emma's pain. And I ran from it." The room went silent. Even his lawyer looked stunned. Daniel's voice cracked. "I told myself I needed peace, but all I really needed was courage. And I didn't have it. Not then. Not until I saw you sitting here today." He turned to the judge. "She's the better parent. She always was." A sharp breath escaped me, but I didn't let it break me. It was too late for redemption, but not for truth. The judge nodded once. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. You may step down." When it was my turn, the courtroom felt smaller, the air warmer. The judge looked at me expectantly. "Mrs. Carter, you may speak before we recess." I stood. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I don't have much to add," I said. "Except this, being a mother isn't about perfection. It's about showing up when it's hard, when it's ugly, when it hurts. I've done that every day since the moment Emma was born. I've learned to fight quietly, to heal slowly, and to forgive softly. But I will never stop protecting my child." The judge's gaze softened. I could feel every heartbeat in my chest. "I am her mother," I said, each word deliberate. "And I will always be her mother. I will do anything to protect her." My words hung in the still air, and I knew, whatever the ruling, I had already won something larger than custody. I had won myself back. The judge nodded. "We'll recess for deliberation." In the hallway, the silence was unbearable. The fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing faintly, marking every second of the waiting. My lawyer offered me coffee, but I couldn't drink. I just paced, my heels echoing on the linoleum, each step a countdown to something I couldn't control. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Then the door opened. Court is back in session. Inside, the judge's expression was unreadable. Daniel's lawyer shifted, fidgeting with her pen. My heart pounded once, twice, then steadied. The judge cleared his throat. After careful consideration, the court has reached a decision. Custody of Emma Carter will remain with her mother, Sarah Carter. The court recognizes the extraordinary care and sacrifice Mrs. Carter has shown. Mr. Carter will have limited visitation rights, pending review. The words hit me like sunlight breaking through cloud. I blinked, unable to breathe for a moment. Then my lawyer touched my arm, smiling softly. The judge looked at me. You have earned the right to raise your daughter in peace. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat ached, but no tears came. Relief doesn't always fall like rain, it seeps in slowly, gently, until you realize you can finally breathe again. When I turned, Daniel was standing. His eyes met mine, no anger, just an understanding that came too late. He nodded once. I returned it. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the day was bright. The courthouse steps felt like the first real ground I'd stood on in years. My lawyer shook my hand, and for the first time in months, the future didn't feel like a fight, it felt like possibility. Later, at home, Emma was waiting, curled on the couch, her rabbit in her arms. Her smile was small but real. Did we win, Mom? She asked. I sat beside her, pulling her close. We did, sweetheart. We did. She sighed against my shoulder. Does that mean no more court? No more court, I whispered, brushing her hair back. Just home. Just us. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, pouring light into the room. I held her tighter, breathing in the moment, the smell of her hair, the warmth of her skin. Peace didn't roar. It whispered. It healed. And for the first time in a very long time, it stayed. The courthouse steps felt warm beneath my soles, even though the air carried a faint chill. I held Emma's hand as she climbed into my arms, her legs curling gently around me. The weight of what we'd just been through still clung to my shoulders, a quiet ache that whispered of battles fought and the cost of maintaining hope. But today, the sun touched us like a promise. I inhaled the faint scent of her strawberry shampoo and the new jacket I'd bought after the verdict. We stood for a moment before the crowd, folding ourselves into the smallest possible space. Emma tucked her stuffed rabbit close. I whispered softly, "We're free now." Relief washed over me, slowly. The years of fear, the nights of anxiety, the endless worry, they had not vanished entirely, but they had changed. I felt them transform into something different, strength. I felt it quietly, softly, in the rhythm of Emma's breathing. "Mom," she said. "Yeah, sweetheart? Can we get ice cream before school?" I looked at her, her smile shining like sunshine after the storm. "Absolutely." And in that simple request I understood how much our new beginning meant. I lowered myself onto the bench beside her and held her. The crowds moved around us, I let them fade. Just us. Just here. And it was enough. That evening, back at our apartment, I found a box of old photos on the coffee table. The pictures spilled out like forgotten memories, our wedding day, Daniel laughing with friends, Emma's first steps. I inhaled the scent of old paper and memory. My chest tightened. I picked up a frame where Daniel's hand rested on mine. His tie was loose back then, the lighting golden. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I put it down gently, tenderness folding into acceptance. Then I gathered the others and placed them inside a small box. I closed the lid firmly. I said quietly, "I'm ready to let go, for good." Night settled in with a gentle hush. I tucked Emma into bed, smoothing her hair back. "Good night, my brave girl," I said softly. "Rest." She smiled and drifted off. I sat in the dark living room, city lights shimmering beyond the window. I let myself remember the promises I'd once believed in, always, forever, better times ahead. They hadn't held. But now I felt something more real. Something I had built myself. A knock on the door startled me. I rose and opened it to find Daniel standing there, bag in hand, eyes red-rimmed, his posture heavy like regret. "Sarah, I messed up," he said. "I'm sorry. Can you help me start over?" My heart thumped. Part of me froze, the old part that still remembered the laughter, the comfort, the promises. But someone else stood behind me, the woman who had held Emma through chemo, who had walked into court without flinching, who had said, "I will not be erased." The woman I had become. "Daniel," I said steadily. "You had your chance." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "I'm done being your safety net. Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. I'm choosing peace over permission. I'm choosing truth over tolerance." He swallowed. "Sarah, I loved you once. Can't we?" No, my voice was quiet but final. "I'm not the same woman you left. I'm the woman who saved our daughter and rebuilt her life. That's enough." I closed the door gently. The sound of the lock clicked behind him like a drumbeat. I slid to the floor, back pressed against the door, tears slipping quietly down, slowly collecting in my lap. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. And tonight, I took the next step. In the park the next afternoon, I watched Emma chase butterflies in the sunlight. The grass was green and warm. I leaned back against the bench, feeling the world fold around us. Her laughter was lilting, careless, a sound I'd waited too long to hear. "She's doing great," the doctor's voice came over the phone later. "Her counts are up. We're hopeful." Relief spread through me like dawn breaking. I let the warmth fill me gently. There were still treatments ahead, but this was a milestone. I kissed Emma's wet cheeks and said, "We've made it through the worst, haven't we, Emma?" She nodded, her eyes bright. "Yes, Mom." Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open. The email notification blinked at me. I clicked it. The offer glowed on the screen, a partnership with a major firm, a chance to lead a project I designed, free of marriage, free of expectation. I closed my eyes. Excitement fluttered quietly inside. "This is it," I whispered. "I'm ready for this. I'm ready for everything." Soft light drifted through the window as night fell. I stood and wrapped my arms around Emma, our silhouettes etched against the city skyline. The past still lived in me, its scars and its lessons, but it no longer defined me. I exhaled gently, quietly, acceptance, hope, renewal. In that moment I realized, the fight had changed. And so had I. The envelope came in the mail 3 days after the verdict. The paper was thick, the ink crisp and official. I held it for a moment before opening it, feeling the weight of years behind that single fold. Inside was the final order, full custody awarded to Sarah Carter. Daniel's visitation rights were listed in sterile lines, reduced to court-approved hours and supervised calls. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was over. Not the kind of ending you cheer for, but the kind that feels like laying a stone down after carrying it too far. At the courthouse one last time, I sat in the back row, waiting for my attorney to sign the final documents. Emma played quietly beside me, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. The judge called my name to confirm receipt of the ruling. When I stood, the courtroom smelled faintly of dust and wood polish, just like it had the first day I walked in. Only this time, my hands weren't shaking. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter," the clerk said, offering a small smile. "You did it." I nodded. "We did it," I whispered to Emma, squeezing her hand. "It's just you and me now." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, the branches creaking softly like an old song. I looked up at the sky. It was bright, cloudless, the kind of day that made you believe life could start over. I felt the warmth on my face, and for the first time, I didn't feel like running from it. Days passed quietly after that. The noise of the courtroom faded into memory, replaced by smaller sounds, Emma's laughter, the turning of pages in her favorite books, the creak of the floor as I walked to check on her at night. Healing didn't roar. It settled gently, piece by piece, like dust finding its home on an untouched shelf. Then, one evening, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes sunken. He looked older than I remembered, like the years had finally caught up with him. "Sarah," he said softly. "Can we talk?" I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "What do you want, Daniel?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to say I'm sorry." I studied his face. The same man who once walked away without looking back now looked like someone searching for a place to rest. "I lost my job," he continued. "Victoria left. Her father pulled the company contract. Everything's gone." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Now you know how it feels," I said quietly. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I do. I was wrong, Sarah. About everything. About you." Daniel, I said, my voice steady, I've already forgiven you. He looked surprised. You have? Yes, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you in my life. Or Emma's. He opened his mouth, searching for something to say, but no words came. I could see the regret written across his face, but regret wasn't the same as change. It never was. You had your chance, I added softly. And I'm done trying to fix what you broke. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I just wanted to tell you that you were right. About everything. I know, I said. He took a step back, his shoulders sagging. Take care of her. Take care of yourself. I always have, I replied, closing the door gently between us. The click of the lock was quiet, final, almost kind. Afterward, I leaned against the door for a moment, my eyes closed. The ache I expected didn't come. Only relief, steady, unshaken. It felt like finishing the last line of a long, painful book. Weeks later, Emma and I began house hunting. She loved walking through the empty rooms, her imagination spilling into every space. This one has enough room for my books, she'd say. Or, can my rabbit have his own chair here? We found a small house on a quiet street, sunlight pouring through wide windows. When the realtor handed me the keys, I held them tight. This is our home now, Emma, I said. And nothing will ever take this away. She jumped into my arms, laughing. I caught her and spun her gently, our laughter filling the empty rooms like a promise. Later that month, my phone rang during breakfast. It was an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a voice said, Mrs. Carter, we'd like to discuss a partnership opportunity with your firm. Your recent work caught our attention. My heart skipped. A partnership? Yes, the woman replied. A 10-year infrastructure project. You'd lead the design team. We want your name on it. I smiled, quietly. I'm listening. When I hung up, I sat for a moment, letting the words settle. For years, success had been tangled up in Daniel's ambitions, his validation. Now, it was mine alone. That afternoon, I signed the new contract. The pen felt lighter this time. My office was filled with sunlight, plants blooming on the sill. My reflection in the glass looked older, steadier, free. This is the beginning of something great, I whispered. That evening, Emma and I unpacked boxes together. She arranged her toys while I filled the kitchen shelves. The scent of fresh paint lingered in the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of the cookies she insisted on baking. Mom, she said, handing me one still warm, does this mean everything's good now? I smiled. It means everything's better. As night fell, I sat on the porch while Emma read aloud to her rabbit by the window. The world outside glowed under the streetlights, quiet and kind. I thought about the woman I had been, the one who whispered apologies into empty rooms, who begged for love from people incapable of giving it. She was gone. In her place was someone who had learned to build peace from the ruins, gently, slowly, in her own time. I took a deep breath, the air cool and new. This is my life now, I whispered. And I am finally free. Somewhere across town, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. He watched the city from his window, his reflection faint against the glass. A photo sat on the table beside him, our family, back when smiles came easily. His hands trembled as he traced the edges. The silence around him was heavy, unforgiving. He whispered into the emptiness, I lost everything I ever wanted. And it's too late to fix it. The city moved on without him. And I did too. In the end, it wasn't revenge that healed her. It was reclaiming the space where her voice had been silenced, and filling it with peace, one quiet breath at a time. What would you do if someone erased you from your own life? If this story moved you, subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and the quiet strength that changes everything.